Good evening and what's up? So, क्या चल रहा है? How's everything with you? So we are meeting each other. At least some of you are meeting me for the first time. और आज मिलते ही the thing that we are going to work on is critical reasoning, which is a pretty challenging area. Let me just cut the echo once. तो काम शुरू किया जाए. Do you have any questions that you want to ask? Any concerns that you may have at the moment? Anything that's coming to your mind? So I know some of you are probably also watching it on YouTube, but this is a class that I'm taking for the batch. So I'll primarily be actually looking at the chat in the batch. तो YouTube वाली chat बीच बीच में मिस हो जाए तो यार बुरा मत मानना, वो अब क्या करें, part of the process है, right? So any questions, any concerns, guys? Anybody? Nikhil, Tushar, Vedant, Shaniket, is there anything that I can help you with before we start? Otherwise, this is our agenda today, right? Introduction to critical reasoning, basic terms used, learning to deconstruct or analyze an argument, and then we will also practice one of those question types that gets asked in the GMAT. So we know that in the GMAT we have 3 sections: verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and data insights. So the area that you are working with me is part of the verbal reasoning section, and this would typically contribute around half of the section there. So you have reading comprehension, and then you obviously have critical reasoning. So half of the section is going to be from what we will go ahead and work on. Anmol says we'll be only doing GMAT focus edition. I mean, Anmol, now we don't even use the label focus edition, right? So there was a brief while when we had the classic edition and the focus edition happening simultaneously. Now since we don't even have it, we don't even use that label. So whatever gets asked in the exam, that is what we go ahead and cover. So Anmol, otherwise anything specific that you had in mind when you asked this? I'm assuming from the verbal reasoning section, the only difference between the classic edition and the focus edition is that the grammar no longer exists. Right, and the quantitative too, I mean DS has now become part of data insights, and that also now contributes to the score and all that, but yeah, we have that there. So if there is nothing else, then let's go ahead and start. This is our first critical reasoning class. Aditya, बीच बीच में यार, if I miss out on your chat, don't mind, मैं कोशिश करूंगा, but guarantees नहीं है. Okay. So I hope you won't get offended if you don't get prompt replies. I'll just try to switch between the two places. So critical reasoning is one of those really special areas. Special in the sense that I teach a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Right? And every teacher also has his favorite areas. So critical reasoning actually happens to be my favorite area. Of all the areas that I teach, I like this the most, closely followed by reading comprehension. My reason for liking this area is pretty straightforward. Number one, I find this immensely useful in life, and because it is also useful in businesses, you have so many questions from this. A business school would typically expect you to have this ability. You will dip into it so very frequently during your case discussions at the college. And then the second thing is that you do not really need to have knowledge of any subject whatsoever. भाई कोई subject नहीं जानना. You can just show up to the examination hall and start solving these questions. हाँ वो ability develop करनी पड़ेगी. Yes, that is there. But beyond that, we don't have anything else that we got to worry about. Anmol said, "Acha, you saw topics in quant and saw geometry." Arey, that's a little strange, but then that's not my area, but I'll definitely pass on the feedback. As far as my classes go, we are working on CR, and then you'd be working with Juhi ma'am on reading comprehension. We are not teaching grammar. It's not a part of the curriculum. But I'll just send the feedback internally. Okay, so, but then the thing is, although it is very useful, it is not, and we also use it in our everyday life, this is an area that we have never studied formally. So Do you recall a class in school and college where you were taught reasoning or logic? Well, unless you took up philosophy, no. And I get very few philosophy majors in my classes, so उसकी probability ज़्यादा है नहीं, है ना? In fact, मैं बोर्ड पे पढ़ाई क्यों रहा हूँ? I think I'll just check with the team. If the logistics work out, we can actually have a two-way audio video that will make our classes better. I'll just try talking to them. The next class, maybe we can experiment with that too. That will hopefully make the classes more interactive, greater fun for both of us. So, because we've never been taught this formally, I plan to start with absolute basics. Critical reasoning is a part of something called logic. Within logic, there is a part called verbal logic or verbal reasoning. So it's a part of verbal reasoning. And I plan to start with an absolute basic क्वेश्चन. अच्छा, GMAT वाले क्लासेस में ना भाई बैच वैसे है तो बाइलिंगुअल, पर मेरी टेंडेंसी पता नहीं क्यों GMAT में पढ़ाने लग जाता हूँ ना, तो मेरे अंदर कभी अंग्रेज जाग जाता है. मैं ज़्यादातर इंग्लिश में ही बोल रहा होता हूँ. अगर आपको इंग्लिश से प्रॉब्लम हो रही हो, कोई चीज़ इस वजह से समझ नहीं आई कि वो इंग्लिश में कही गई थी, मुझे यार जस्ट ड्रॉप इट इन द चैट एंड मैं आपके लिए दोहरा दूंगा वो, ठीक है? तो अदरवाइज वो फ्लो में ना ध्यान नहीं रहता है. मुझे आदत पड़ी हुई GMAT में एक्सक्लूसिव इंग्लिश पढ़ाने की, पर मेरी हिंदी और पंजाबी भी अच्छी हैं तो मैं इनमें भी आपको समझा सकता हूँ. सो बिल्कुल बेसिक क्वेश्चन से शुरू करते हैं. व्हाट इज रीजनिंग? व्हाट्स योर टेक ऑन दिस? व्हाट्स योर आंसर? हाँ जी, एनीबडी? गो अहेड, ड्रॉप इन योर आंसर इन द चैट. Okay, so matlab I need to do the heavy lifting today. Chaliye. So since, okay, sense making, Chaitanya, that's good. Clarification. Digambar says thinking logically. Jash, rationality. Anmol also is bringing in logic. So I'm just parking this word somewhere. Okay, do you know what logic is? I mean, we do use this word, but do we know what logic is? Okay, so let's just try to understand it with an example. So there is this very popular movie called Three Idiots. By any chance, could you get an opportunity to watch it? Pratik is giving reasons to justify is reasoning. I mean, I normally avoid using the word reason to define reasoning, but you know, that can create a circular reasoning problem, as we call it, can create a logical flaw. Oh, Pratik Kamra. My Nanihal is Kamra. So that name is, that surname is close to my heart for sure. Hanji, so if you watched it, did you like it? If yes, if you say that, oh yes, I liked this movie, then what you are fundamentally telling me is that Three Idiots is a good movie. Now, to take a cue from Pratik, why did you like it? What made this a good movie for you? So, Chaitanya, what are your reasons? Digambar, what are your reasons? So I can go by the averages. I mean, normally when I ask people about a movie, they typically talk about things like direction, story, script, and in the case of Three Idiots too, a lot of people enjoyed it because it talked to them. It talked about the challenges, the issues, the pressures that they were facing. हाँ, so बहुत relatable story थी. हाँ, उसमें importance of good friends sort of part of the story. हाँ, इसके अलावा हाँ, we can say acting, music, some of us may have liked the humor that the movie had. मतलब वो चतुर वाली legendary speech तो ध्यान है ना तुम्हें? हाँ, और I'm sure अगर तुम और मैं बैठ के सोचें तो वी कैन कीप एडिंग टू द लिस्ट, बट इतना बहुत है. सो बेसिकली था क्या, दैट देयर वाज अ डे व्हेन यू वॉच्ड दिस मूवी फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम. नाउ व्हेन यू वॉच्ड दिस मूवी फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, all these facts reached your mind. मूवी देखते देखते ये सारी चीजें आपके दिमाग तक पहुंची. जब ये आपके दिमाग तक पहुंची तो आपके दिमाग ने इन फैक्ट्स को एक प्रोसेस के थ्रू गुजारा. योर माइंड रैन दीज फैक्ट्स थ्रू अ प्रोसेस, एंड द एंड रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस प्रोसेस इज दिस opinion that you have today that Three Idiots is a good movie. है ना? Right? So this process is called reasoning. So this process that you used in your mind is reasoning. If I were to formally define it, I'll say that reasoning is a special type of thinking in which you think over some facts in order to arrive at a conclusion. Now, opinion is basically what a kind of a conclusion, right? So here is the definition to you in writing. Rahul, we don't have separate Telegram, batch specific Telegram groups. Don't have that. Right? Will that work? Now let's tackle the next label that we had, verbal. Remember, we are working on verbal reasoning. So what exactly is verbal? How do you go on to define it? बताइए. हाँ प्रतीक, आएंगे उस पे यार. अभी we talk about these moving forward. I'm not using a term that I haven't explained, and therefore I've avoided using that label. So what is verbal? This is a word which is so often misunderstood. Bunch of words, use of words. Okay, so I'll tell you where the problem comes from. A lot of people think that verbal basically means spoken, oral, right? But then if I tap into your knowledge of another area, are you aware of something called non-verbal reasoning? Sorry, not reasoning. That's not something that you would probably readily be able to talk about. But how about this? What if I ask you about non-verbal communication? How do you define it? Communication is where we express ourselves to others, right? So if I express myself non-verbally, what would that be? Communication using body language, facial expressions, eyes, gestures. So can I say all those forms of communication where we express ourselves without using words are called non-verbal forms of communication, right? So what will verbal communication be then? What is verbal communication then? Verbal communication is where we use words. Now those words are going to be spoken or written. Now the answer is either. So verbal as an adjective does not mean spoken. Verbal as an adjective stands for something that is related to words, something that is related to language, भाषा के आस पास. जबकि नॉन वर्बल जो है ना वो लैंग्वेज इंडिपेंडेंट हो जाता है. वो आपको मैथ की तरफ, सिंबल्स की तरफ, स्ट्रक्चर की तरफ लेकर के, स्ट्रक्चर तो खैर ये भी आएगा, बट मैथमेटिक्स या सिंबल्स की तरफ लेकर के जाता है. Right? So when we say verbal reasoning, we are talking about those aspects of reasoning that rely on language, and that is exactly why they are part of the verbal reasoning section. Right? Now let's move over to the next bit. which is the basic terms that are used in the world of verbal reasoning. So the terms are, in fact, there are just 4 terms that I want to talk about. Out of those 4 terms, 3 are very everyday, right? So one is statement, then we have conclusion and premise. Statements can be of 2 types, and then you have something called an argument. That is it. I just want to talk about these 4 words first, or these 4 terms first. Now, why am I talking about these? Why do we need to spend time on this? See, the reason is that, and you've experienced it too, has it ever happened that you said something to someone and that person misunderstood you, misinterpreted you? कभी ऐसा हुआ तुमने जो बोला उसको गलत समझ लिया, सामने वाले ने कुछ और ही मीनिंग निकाल लिया? So Pratik, once I define this, then I'll start using the language that you're comfortable with. So होता है ना? So there can be various reasons why somebody else misinterprets or misunderstands us. But one of the reasons is this peculiar trait in a language, and that is a single word can have multiple meanings. A single word can have multiple meanings. For example, you used a word a little while ago. Some of you used this word. And the word that you used was logic. Now, what do we mean by logic? You can take a shot, you can share your meaning with me. But then, when I talk to my friends in my life, I notice that they typically use the word logic interchangeably with common sense, making sense, that kind of a thing. So for example, I am at the 8th floor of a building at the moment. So let's say you and I both are here. We need to go downstairs. So obviously what would you do? You will take the lift, you will take the elevators. So you taking the elevators, then I look at you and I say, "Yeah, rude, yeah, you take the elevator. I am in a rush. I don't have time. I'll jump from the balcony and go." Now, if you hear this, you look at me and say, "Yaar, what? Vikrant, kaisi baatein kar raha hai? That's illogical. That does not make sense." So a lot of people would typically use logic in that particular meaning, right? But when the examiner says that I'm going to test your logic, are they going to test our common sense? Nahin, na? So logic is also the name of a subject matter. Logic is also the name of an area that you study under philosophy. So logic as a branch of philosophy deals with ideal thought processes. तो हम सब सोचते हैं, हमारा सोचने का तरीका आइडियल तरीके के कितना पास है. That's what is tested here. So when the examiner says I'm going to test you on logic, what they're saying is that, hey, I'm going to see how ideal your thought processes are, or how close to the ideal you really are, how good you are when it comes to thinking in a systematic, structured manner to figure out the truth. But then, if you don't know that other meaning, and I use logic, I may have that other meaning in my mind, but you'd hear it, you'd think of it as common sense, and that can lead to a communication gap. And obviously in these classes, I would not want you and I to have any communication gap whatsoever. क्यों छोड़े communication gap? तो इसलिए हाँ, ये basic से words है, but I want to define it in order to ensure that you and I both are on that exact same page. So Anant, you were very close to the definition. Good work. So let's dive into these basic terms. The first one is statement. So what is a statement? A group of words that affirms or denies something. That is it. भाई शब्दों का एक ऐसा ग्रुप जो या तो बता रहा हो कि कोई चीज होती है, हो रही है, या फिर कोई चीज नहीं होती, नहीं हो रही, नहीं हुई थी, राइट? जैसे अगर मैं बोलता हूं इट इज रेनिंग, I am affirming something, and if I say it is not raining, I am denying something. So I am affirming something, therefore it is so it's a group of words affirming, it's a statement. It is not raining, well, it's a group of words that is denying something, so this is also a statement. Simple. So throughout these classes and even later when you prepare your answers to interview questions, etc., and we happen to talk, when I use the word statement, this is exactly how I'm going to use it. Now statements can be of 2 types, okay? Can be. Not every statement is going to be of one of those two types, but they can be of those two types. So those two types are conclusion and premise. So what do you understand by conclusion? I think intuitively we all know what a conclusion is. So let me just define it from the perspective of critical reasoning for you. So conclusion is a special type of statement that receives the support from some other statement. I'll leave you to read it and then we'll talk. Read it and give it 3 seconds and then we'll talk. Done? So, for instance, let's have a look at this. Identical twins often have different IQ test scores. So that's a statement, right? Let's call it statement 1. Yet such twins inherit the same genes. That's another piece of information for us, statement 2. And then you have, so environment must play some part in determining IQ. So this is your statement 3. But then in this particular scenario, the third statement is getting supported by the first two. So can I say in this scenario, statement 1 and statement 2 help us arrive at statement 3? So whenever we see a statement that receives the support from some other statements, we start calling it a conclusion. So in this case, our statement 3 is a conclusion. Fair enough? And now the other term is premise. Premise is the counterpart of your conclusion. So it's a special type of statement that provides support to some other statement. So in the previous instances, statement 1, statement 2, both of those were premises. Now, in our everyday life, we don't really use the word premise. The word that we typically use is reason, basis, justification, evidence. Those are the kind of words that we actually go on to use. But here, we are defining it in a very simple way. If a statement provides support to some other statement, we will call it a premise. Here is an example for you. For instance, here, this is your conclusion. Global warming is real, but on what basis are we saying that it is real? The basis is here. Because the most reputable science points to that direction. So this is going to be your premise. Right? Now, just a tiny note on pronunciation. In the singular form, you can call it a premise, you can call it a premise, both are acceptable. Premise is the original pronunciation, premise is a more contemporary take on that. But in the plural, we always pronounce it as premises because premises refers to a building. Okay? So सिंगुलर में प्रेमिस बोलो, प्रेमाइस बोलो, दोनों चलेगा. प्लूरल में हमेशा प्रेमिसेस बोलना है. और इस कंफ्यूजन को अवॉइड करने का सबसे आसान तरीका क्या है? यार सिंगुलर में भी प्रेमिस ही बोलो, फिर प्लूरल में अपने आप प्रेमिसेस निकलेगा. राइट? सो यू डन. एंड देन फाइनली this fourth label, argument. So before I share my take on it, I want you to share your take on this. So Roshan, what is an argument? And Pratik, what's an argument? Okay. So, plenty of things, right? So, we normally think of argument as Josh says, two different opinions. Rafi says a conversation of proving a valid point. So, taking a stance, right? So, sharing your opinion is an argument. Two different opinions is an argument. Contradiction, absolutely, that's an argument. Digambar, that is slightly, there is a slight mistake there, but we talk about it. Discussing different points of views, that is an argument. Absolutely. So you notice there are a lot of different ways in which we define it. So we can define an argument as forming an opinion, or say simply put, taking a stance. An argument can be difference of opinion. An argument can refer to a debate. At times even a heated discussion or an altercation, है ना, वो लड़ाई झगड़ा बहस सब हम argument के अंदर डाल देते हैं. Now all these meanings are absolutely okay when it comes to English, when it comes to our life. Vihan says supporting or opposing, absolutely. So the process is involved around difference of opinion or debate, true that. So all of these meanings are valid in life, in English, but none of these meanings is used in the world of reasoning. So we will not use any of these, right? So in these classes, when we use the word argument, this is exactly what we mean. So an argument is a set of interconnected statements that contains a conclusion. Or in other words, if I just go break it down, an argument is a set of statements, a group of statements. Now in this group, in this set, you will have some of these statements acting as premises and only one statement acting as the conclusion, where the person who offered the premises, his intention was to provide support for the conclusion. So this structure is called an argument. If I capture it pictorially, this is how an argument would typically look to you. For instance, we were talking about Three Idiots a little while ago, right? So in Three Idiots, you said that it is a good movie and that there were all these reasons. Now let's just check this. Is it a set of statements? Yes. Some of these are premises, reasons. Yes. One of these is a conclusion. Yes. The purpose of the premises is to support. Yes. That was the intention. So this entire structure will be called an argument. So in the world of logic, argument is a very neutral word. It carries no negative connotation that it may carry in our everyday life. Right? Now, where do all those other meanings come from? For example, now Priksha says statement given to support or oppose a conclusion. They are typically premises, right? But then think of it, think of any difference of opinion scenario and then think what we do there. For example, a few months ago, social media was ablaze by a particular discussion that was centered around the movie Animal. So there were some people who were saying that, oh, Animal is a good movie, and then there were people who said that Animal is a bad movie. So their conclusions were contradicting each other. But in both the cases, people who said that it is good, they had their own reasons. They said that it is good because of, A, B and C, and people who called it bad, they said that, oh, it is such a horrible movie because of X, Y and Z. Misogyny, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, God knows what all. So now if you look at it from the perspective of this definition, when I say Animal is a good movie because of A, B and C, that is an argument. When you say Animal is a bad movie because of X, Y and Z, that is also a different argument. It so happens that the conclusions of these two arguments are contradictory. So when two people discuss, when two people debate, what do? They exchange their arguments with each other, and that is why this process is known as the process of argumentation. So this is the definition from which all of those other definitions actually stem from, originate from. Okay, so in these classes when we work together, we use these definitions in order to avoid any ambiguity, misinterpretation, misunderstanding. So throughout these sessions and even beyond, that's how we treat it. So I'll give you a quick recap. Statement, a group of words which affirms or denies something. Conclusion, a statement that receives the support. Premise, a statement that offers the support. And argument, a set of statements which has a conclusion and some premises. Exactly this. So are we good? Can we move on? Or do we have a doubt? Do we have a question? So if you have a question, post this in, and this is your homework for the day. When we meet each other tomorrow, I'm going to ask you this question. Ask you for the answer to this question. Fantastic. Chaliye. So if there are no questions, we can move in. Take a screenshot or whatever, jot it down, keep it in your mind. This is your homework for tomorrow. Okay, so now let's dive into the area that gets tested in the GMAT, which is called critical reasoning. Now, within the world of reasoning, there are a lot of different question types, lot of different question varieties that are used by various exams over the years. In fact, GMAT also conducts some of the exams for the Indian B schools. They conduct, for instance, an exam called the GMAT. Now, in that exam, they use a question type called syllogism, which is designed to test your reasoning. Now, if you know syllogism, great. If you do not, let me refresh your memory. Have you ever seen questions like all A are B, some B are C, therefore whatever, huh? Therefore some C are A. You've seen these kind of questions. All dogs are lions, some rats are not tigers, though that variety. So if you see, Roshan, we will discuss it tomorrow. The same also applies to a statement, by the way, no? So you remember these questions? You realize these are artificially created questions. These are cooked up. I mean, in life you won't have all cats are lions, right? Isn't it? So there are a lot of different areas that we can create to test you on reasoning. Most of them are artificial, cooked up areas that do not resemble life. But critical reasoning is that aspect of reasoning, the aspect of specifically verbal reasoning that resembles life. So in critical reasoning, we actually learn to deal with the kind of arguments that are found in the world around us. So this specific area is called argument. Is called critical reasoning. Saying arguments. यही होता है अब ना, साथ साथ मैसेज पढ़ रहा था, साथ साथ बोल रहा था, मेरा प्रोसेसर पुराना हो गया है, उसे रिफ्रेश करना पड़ेगा मुझे. So you get it? Now what is our goal? What exactly it is that you and I plan to work? So when it comes to the GMAT exam, there are these 11 different question types that we need to master. If you go through these 11 question types, you would be kind of done with the entire critical reasoning segment. Will you come across each one of these 11 types in the exam? Not really. You would get what? Somewhere between 10 to 13 critical reasoning questions in the paper. There is no guarantee that you would encounter each one of these in the exam, but you can get any one of these. Some of these are of course higher frequency than the others. I'll perhaps be focusing more on those, but these are the 11 question types that you and I plan to focus on. So what are those 11 question types? The first is bold-faced questions. A lot of people actually leave it for later, and I understand why, but then we'll see. Then identify the assumption, strengthen the argument, weaken the argument, identify the logical flaw, evaluate the argument, identify the inference, resolve the paradox, parallel or similar structure arguments. Then dialogue based questions. Now this is not exactly a new variety. You will use something that you've picked up from one of these other question types. It's a different way of phrasing questions. And then Another different way of phrasing the questions will be para completion. So in a way, I'll say that there are these 9 core things that we need to learn, and then there are these 2 question types that will test you again on one of these 9 things, but in a slightly different manner. So we plan to go through these 11 things, these 11 question types all in all when we work on these together. In each one of these, हाँ ठीक है, आगे कुछ और nuances हैं, डिफरेंसेस हैं, वो उनको हम आगे कवर करते चलेंगे जब इनको पढ़ेंगे तो. हाँ, तो इन सब में लेकिन बेस क्या है? How do you really go on to become good at critical reasoning? So I typically say that there are 3 core requirements. One of these is that you should have the ability to understand what you read. तो भाई इंग्लिश में एक पैराग्राफ लिखा होगा, उस पैराग्राफ में जो भी कुछ लिखा है वो सब समझ में आना चाहिए. So in order to do that, you need to become better at comprehension. So in our course, since we are teaching you RC, you'll obviously be working on this skill, but with जूही मैम in this particular batch. ना, तो जूही मैम आपके साथ RC पे काम करेंगी. तो comprehension वाले जो भी आपके issues हो, concerns हो, आप अपने RC के classes से उनको resolve कर लीजिए. The second thing is the ability to analyze an argument. To look at an argument and figure out the conclusion, the premises. So, I mean, in fact, if I were to define it, I will say that argument is the building block of reasoning. That's the foundational thing that we really have. So, every critical reasoning question, one way or the other, will test some aspect of our understanding of the arguments. So, you need to have that ability to analyze it. Or in other words, deconstruct it, break it down into its constituent components. And then the third thing is the ability to think objectively, the ability to be absolutely precise. For instance, now one fine day there were these 3 professors who taught at a university together. They were colleagues. So there was a professor who taught philosophy, another one who taught sociology, and the third one taught mathematics. And they were good friends. So they decided to go on a trip together and they went to Australia, where there is a right-wing group which is, by the way, protesting against Indians at the moment. So they went to Australia, they were in a train. Now the sociologist was looking outside. The mathematician was reading a book and the philosopher was grappling with some problem in his mind. He was mulling over some philosophy problem that he wanted to find an answer to. Now suddenly the sociologist exclaimed, "Oh, sheep in Australia are black." Now when he said sheep in Australia are black, the mathematician looked up. Then he looked out of the window. Then he looked at the sociologist and said, "Yeah, come on. There is only one sheep outside. So why are you saying sheep in Australia are black? You should have said there is at least one sheep in Australia which is black." Be precise, be objective. So when they were discussing it, the philosophy professor also got interested now. So he also looked outside. Then he looked at the mathematician, the math professor, and said, "Yeah, come on, if you're teaching him, teach him right. Both of you should say, there is at least one sheep in Australia whose at least one side is black. Do you see the other side? दूसरी side दिख रही तुमको? Be precise. सिखा रहे हो तो ढंग से सिखाओ तुम. तो अब तुम देख रहे हो ऑब्जेक्टिव होना क्या होता है. देयर इज एटलीस्ट वन शिप इन ऑस्ट्रेलिया हुज एटलीस्ट वन साइड इज ब्लैक. जो दिख रहा है उतना. तो माइंड को इतना ट्रेन करना कि वो एग्जैक्टली क्या है वो दिखे, इसमें बायस नहीं आए, इसमें इमेजिनेशन नहीं आ जाए, इसमें जनरलाइजेशंस नहीं आ जाए. सो टू train your mind to think along those lines, well, that is going to be the key. और ये जो 2 चीजें हैं, इन 2 चीजों पे आप मेरे साथ काम कर रहे हैं. राइट तो इसमें इससे शुरू करते हैं, एनालाइजिंग एन आर्ग्यूमेंट से. सो व्हेन आई से एनालाइजिंग एन आर्ग्यूमेंट, इट सिंपली मींस डीकंस्ट्रक्टिंग इट, राइट, फाइंडिंग आउट द कंक्लूजन एंड द प्रेमिसेस. तो टिपिकली एक आर्ग्यूमेंट में क्या होगा, हमें पता है कंक्लूजन और प्रेमिसेस होते हैं. सो हियर इज अ क्वेश्चन फॉर यू. कैन यू टेल मी द कंक्लूजन एंड द प्रेमिस इन दिस क्वेश्चन? Go ahead, share it with me in the chat. I'll make it easy for you by labeling these. So this is your statement 1 and this is your statement 2. So which one is the conclusion? Which one is the premise? Correlation causation is a different thing, yaar. Fantastic. Okay, so when I look at these two, the first one is the premise, the second one is the conclusion. Absolutely right. In this case, it was actually easy. Easy because of the presence of this word called so. Whenever we use the word so, we know that what comes after it is a conclusion. So words like so are known as conclusion indicators. So it's a conclusion indicator, and there are quite a few other words and expressions that act like conclusion indicators. For example, check this. Accordingly, clearly, consequently, this indicates that, hence, it follows that, so, therefore, thus, all of these. So whatever comes after these is generally going to be a conclusion, is generally going to be an opinion. Right? Chale. Moving over to the next one now. You can, of course, you'd get the notes, you'd have the deck with you afterwards. So you can, of course, go ahead and read them at leisure. Question 2. Just to keep it easy, statement 1 and then the other one is statement 2. Premise, conclusion, please. All right, so here is my take. So the first one is the conclusion, the second one is the premise, and just like question 1, it was easy for me because of the presence of the word because. Now because is used to offer what? A reason. Reason is a premise. So because is known as a premise indicator. So word like because, we typically call it a premise indicator. There you go. And there are more words and expressions that can act as premise indicators. Here is a partial list of those for you to go through. We done? Okay, so here is the next question. Now, by question 1 and question 2, some people may get this impression that, oh, that's easy. भाई conclusion indicator, premise indicator देख लेंगे, काम हो जाएगा. पर नहीं यार, हमेशा हर एक argument में premise और conclusion indicators हों, ऐसा बिल्कुल भी जरूरी नहीं है. There is no guarantee that you'd always get an indicator, and that is why comprehension is important. Okay, so here is question number 3. I'm not labeling it as S1, S2, S3, whatever. Why don't you go ahead and tell me the conclusion and the premises now? You can just type the first word, first couple of words, and that'll do. Otherwise, you guys are doing really fabulous. And Pratik, it's good to see you involved. Priksha, you too. Jash, Divya, Krish, fabulous यार. बाकी लोग भी भाई आंसर्स दे लो, नहीं तो ऐसे मतलब इसको उस तरीके से मत देखो कि स्पेक्टेटर स्पॉट है. पार्टिसिपेट करोगे तो ज्यादा मजा आएगा. All right, so here is my take. This part we had better leave now. This is our conclusion. Whereas the next sentence shares the premise with you. So let's just think. So some of us thought that this is the conclusion, right? Kanishka, I'm assuming you are Bengali. So Kanishka, nope. An action plan is not a conclusion. Our definition of conclusion is a statement that gets supported by some other statement. That's it. So what do? You remember your premise is what? We call it a reason, basis, justification. So come to think of it, if you want to figure out the reasons, what do? You ask a why. I ended up writing a what, but you ask a why, right? So the answer to the why gives you reasons. The answer to on what basis would also give you reasons, right? Reasons or justifications, premises. So if you think this is the conclusion, we will be stuck here all night. Now let me ask you, when you say we will be stuck here all night, why? On what basis are we saying this? Are these other two acting as reasons? Are they providing support to it? Why will we be stuck here all night? The other two don't. But if I ask you, why must we leave now? The reason for that is that if we don't leave right now, we will miss the last train and then we'll be stuck here last night. That is why we must leave right now, or we'd better leave right now. Right? So you can ask a why, you can ask on what basis, you can think in terms of reason, basis, justification, whatever helps you straighten out this process. So this is very important. Okay, because if we are not able to analyze the conclusion, we will not be able to get a great accuracy rate in those 11 question types. This is the foundation for us. So we make sure that we do practice it a fair bit, and wherever you need to discuss it with me, I'm all around. Here is the, okay, and there are times when I put in a lot of effort on my deck, so here is my take. This is your conclusion, these are your premises. So far I kept things simple, and I told you that an argument basically has what? Premises and conclusions. But then the truth is, in our everyday life, nobody is always economical. People would not give you only the relevant thing. There are times when we may go ahead and add certain things to an argument that provide context. They are not a crucial part. They're not every statement may play a very important role. Some statements may simply give you a context. So in that case, you read the paragraph and you figure out the argument by removing the context. For instance, here is an example for you. Why don't you go ahead and read it and then we'll talk. Okay, so in this particular case, you notice one of this neighborhood residents has been complaining about his sister Sarah having been unemployed for so long. She's applying for programming jobs at many companies, but she only received a first interview invite last week. This is just the context. The real deal actually starts later. She will probably receive a job offer because, so what comes after is a premise. So why is she likely to receive a job offer according to the author? Because she has 10 years of experience, and in a job market like the current one, anything over 8 years experience gives a candidate a great advantage. So the argument is just this part, right? So this entire thing is the context. So if you ask me, here is the conclusion, and the rest of it that I've put in the second bullet point, that's your premise. So you may not always be limited to relevant stuff, the core of the argument in every single statement. So once again, another use case for comprehension. एक और जगह जहां पे अपने को यार थोड़ा comprehension की जरूरत पड़ेगी और core argument को बाकी के context से अलग करना पड़ेगा, right? So ये रहा question 4. I have a very simple question for you here. Can you tell me the conclusion of this argument? I'm just leveling up things a little, making them progressively tougher. So what's your take? Oh, Vihan, just saw your message. Let me just go read the argument once. हाँ नहीं, that definitely यार वो current job market Vihan was definitely a relevant part. I just ended up paraphrasing it. Ideally I should not have, but initial classes we just tend to keep things, we just try to at times oversimplify, but you're absolutely right that context thing is definitely a part of your premise there. Yeah. So essentially what the author wants to say here is that we must reinstate capital punishment. So the key is reinstate capital punishment. There are times when you may not say things directly. There are times when you speak about things in a roundabout manner. Now, why should we reinstate capital punishment? Because some criminals deserve to die, and when you have capital punishment, it sends that message to those criminals that, hey, you do this and we'll come after you. We'll not let you live. This is crossing the boundary. So yeah, okay, taking it a level up still. What is the conclusion here? Please read it and share the conclusion with me. So, no, we were very clearly, Chaitanya, we were talking about crimes. Okay, let's check. मतलब आंसर मत दे दियो, इतना देखते ही पढ़ना बंद कर दिया क्या तुमने? देखो पहली क्लास है, मैं जज कर रहा हूं तुमको अगर तुम आंसर शेयर नहीं कर रहे हो तो. वैसे मैं जजमेंटल हूं नहीं लाइफ में, मेरे से ज्यादा नॉन जजमेंटल बंदा तुम्हें मिलेगा नहीं. बट एब्सोल्युटली यस कनिष्का, परफेक्ट. सो यस अनमोल, यू कैन से द फर्स्ट लाइन, or you could also have said that the last part, this also basically restates the first line, no? So you could have picked up any of these. What is the premise here? Any guesses what the premise must be? So the provincial government of British Columbia and / or the federal government of Canada should regulate the fisheries. Do you know the meaning of and / or? In case you do not, just put it as part of your homework, okay? All non-partisan scientific studies show the devastating effects of salmon farming on the native Pacific ecosystem. Salmon is a type of fish. So why do we need to regulate the fisheries? Because they have devastating effects on the native Pacific ecosystem. So that's your premise. And I'm just adding more and more things that we encounter in an argument, okay? Let's read further. The essential problem stems from the fact that it is impossible to keep the farmed salmon completely isolated. Once farmed salmon have escaped, they have the potential to outcompete white salmon for scarce resources, since the farm variety have been genetically engineered to swim faster and consume more. In addition, most farmed salmon is Atlantic, which tends to outcompete the wild Pacific species. This then has devastating effects on wild populations. So when we say it has devastating effects, there is an elaboration, there is a detail that is presented to us. What is the devastating effect? One is the effect on the wild population, where when these fish get released in the ocean accidentally, the native species can disappear. So that's one devastating effect. So let's call it devastating effect number 1. And thereafter, devastating effect number 2. The pollution from the farms also has a negative impact on the entire ecosystem. So in reality, there is just one conclusion, one premise, everything else is written to support or elaborate upon that premise. There is an expansion, right? So typically when we write a paragraph, we do write details. So if you look at the components of a writing, there are times when we state an idea, there are times when we offer a fact, statistics, example, evidence, there are times when we elaborate, there are times when we explain, there are times when we reiterate and restate, we do tons of things. In fact, all those tons of things, I've actually labeled all of them in our discussion right now. Those are the things that we basically do. So everything else is essentially a detail. Right? So when you read something, this key understanding is what you need to have, that okay, here is the core of the argument. Then of course there are things that go on to support your or elaborate upon your premises. Right? So conclusion, premise, context, and well, there is a third variation as well, and that is you can get a paragraph. Notice I'm not using argument now. The paragraph that the examiner gives you can have an argument and a counter argument. So there are times when you write something, when you say something, because you want to prove someone else wrong. For example, that moving back to that animal example, I may start my paragraph by saying that, hey, there are quite a few people out there who believe that Animal is a good movie because of A, B, and C. However, they are wrong. Animal is an out and out bad movie and should be condemned because of A, B, and C. And even in their argument, they have committed this logical flaw which renders it invalid anyway. So you notice there are times when you pick up someone else's argument. Now you may not pick up the entire argument. There are times when you may pick up just somebody's conclusion. There are times when you may mention their conclusion along with their premises, and after that you state your counter argument which presents your conclusion backed by your premises. So this same thing can actually happen twice in a paragraph. Kanishka, yes, you can, we call the support to DE1 and 2 as context. You can call that the context, yes, if you want to, absolutely. They did, so context also plays a role in the previous question. So if you compare question 4 and question 5, in question 4 the context was not playing much of a role. It was just setting the stage, whereas in question number 5, the context was essentially acting as something which was relevant for your premise. So in that sense, yeah, the quality of the context can vary, but you can put it under context. So here is an instance. Can you go through this and notice the argument, counter argument kind of a scenario here? All right, so you see this, many students would like to smoke on campus. So some people may rightly argue that smoking on campus is not illegal, then it should be permitted. So essentially smoking should be permitted. Why? Because it's not illegal. However, now this person says second-hand smoke may cause harm to those who have health issues like asthma, possibly putting them at risk. So what is the author trying to communicate through this part? It is a premise for a conclusion that he has not explicitly stated, and that conclusion will be that, we may have some problems if we permit it. So we should not permit it. Right? So they say we should permit it. They say that smoking should be permitted. This guy says that not exactly, because smoking can cause issues to others. And all of these things, right, these unstated things, etc., we will learn to figure these things out in our classes together. Here is another instance. Can you see that there are two different arguments here? If yes, then can you share those two conclusions with me? Pratik, one of these will reflect the stance of the author. And that is the one that you would basically pick up as the ultimate conclusion. Huh? Okay, so let's go ahead and then check. So some people argue that using animals as test subjects for health products is justifiable. So this is the take of some people. And then, to be fair, animal testing has been used in the past to aid the development of several vaccines such as smallpox and rabies. Now you notice whenever we use words like however, unfortunately, but, there is going to be the opposite that we stated. Animal testing for beauty products causes unneeded pain to animals. There are alternatives to animal testing. Instead of using animals, it's possible to use human volunteers. Additionally, this guy suggested an alternative method, right? So if alternatives to animal testing exist, then the practice causes unnecessary animal suffering and should not be used. So some people say using animals as test subjects for health products is justifiable, and our author says that if alternatives to animal testing exist, then in those cases it is not justifiable. Why? Causes unnecessary pain to them. So that's basically what we had in this particular case. And absolutely yes, first and last. So that is the basic groundwork. Now, before I dive into our first question type, I have a very simple ask. And that simple ask is that typically when we think of studying, we think of, sitting on a table and a chair and then studying, and you can use that strategy for critical reasoning. That's advisable, but do not restrict yourself to just a table and a chair. I told you earlier that critical reasoning is an area that allows us to deal with the kind of arguments that we meet in our everyday life. So start increasing your awareness of the arguments around you. Even something as simple as, for instance, I was meeting a friend last week, and we were thinking of going to a particular restaurant. But my friend recommended a restaurant. So I asked her, okay, why are we going to this particular restaurant? Any particular reason? And the reasons were offered thereafter. So the moment that discussion happened, there was an argument happening there. This particular restaurant because. So arguments are a part of your life. They are floating all around you. If you become aware of those arguments and you start analyzing them subconsciously, you will be able to get a lot of practice out of those instances, those interactions by themselves. So बिना पढ़े पढ़ाई हो जाएगी, प्लस लाइफ में थोड़ा बेटर भी करोगे, डिसीजंस इंप्रूव हो जाएंगे, लोगों को ज्यादा अच्छे से परसुएड कर पाओगे. So plenty of benefits too. So do that. So let's go ahead and now talk about a question type called boldface questions. In the recent past, this question is not exactly a favorite of the examiner. So until around 4-5 years ago, this question type was asked quite frequently. Now the frequency has dropped. It is not asked in that same level of volume as it was asked earlier. Now, what exactly do we do in this particular question? Krish, nice piece of information, but are you sure that you're using the correct verb? अब मतलब फोकस एडिशन में ग्रामर आती नहीं तो हम कुछ भी लिख लेंगे क्या? है? What do we say? A hen lays eggs. Remember? And you are laying on the bed. ये एक तो ये ले सही है क्या, ये मेरे को कल बताने का क्लास में, ठीक है. और दूसरी चीज, भाई ये लिख क्यों रहा है चार्ट में, इसका कंटेक्स्ट क्या है, फायदा क्या हो रहा है इससे मुझे या तुझे. हाँ चलो. सो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली आर बोल्ड फेस क्वेश्चंस? बहुत ही आसान है ये तो बताना. सो अ बोल्ड फेस क्वेश्चन ऑफर्स यू एन आर्ग्यूमेंट विद वन और मोर स्टेटमेंट्स हाईलाइटेड बाय मेकिंग देम बोल्ड. सिंपल. एक पैराग्राफ होगा, पैराग्राफ में एक या दो स्टेटमेंट्स को बोल्ड किया होगा, और फिर जो क्वेश्चन स्टेम है, क्वेश्चन स्टेम क्या होता है ये बता देता हूं पहले, एंड देन वील मूव ऑन. सो इन अ टिपिकल क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग क्वेश्चन यू फाइंड 3 कंपोनेंट्स. सो यू हैव अ पैराग्राफ. दिस पैराग्राफ may or may not contain an argument. Whether it contains an argument or not depends on the question type. So in some question types you'd always get an argument, and in some you'll rarely get an argument. So you have a paragraph, and then you have your 5 options. Between the paragraph and the options you find a sentence that asks you to do something. That sentence is called the question stem. So you have a paragraph where 1 or 2 statements are highlighted, and the question stem will ask you that, okay, what is the role played by the highlighted part or parts in that argument? So typically, what does a highlighted part do? I mean, what does an argument have? At the end of the day, they're just testing your ability to analyze complex arguments. And easy questions, they not even test you on complex arguments. So if I talk about, say, a 535, 545 type of question, it will not even be a complex argument for that matter. So not as frequent. I've already shared these with you. So what can a statement do in an argument? It can act as a premise, it can act as a conclusion, or if there is a argument counter argument paragraph, it can be a premise or a conclusion involved with either of the 2 arguments. Additionally, so the examiner in the answer choices may not use these 2 terms. He may get into their synonyms, right? So instead of using premise, he can say that this highlighted part is used to support the author's main conclusion, oppose the author's main conclusion, whatever. And additionally, you remember the context bit. So it can be part of a context where it can be a piece of evidence that supports a premise, elaboration of a premise, etc. So those things are rare. Elaboration, etc. are rare, but evidence, etc. is something that can still be asked, can be used, right? So there you go. Chaitanya says, I'm seeing this class. Are you sure? Are you sure? Seeing. Here is a sentence for you. If I walk up to you and say, with an air of mystery, if I tell you, Chaitanya, you know what? I'm seeing someone. What does it mean? You're attending the class, or maybe you're watching the lecture. So खैर, क्वेश्चंस करते हैं, अपने आप हो ही जाएगा. तो ये रहा आपका पैराग्राफ. इनफैक्ट पैराग्राफ अलग से दे ही क्यों रहा हूं मैं. अच्छा, ये वो वाले हैं जो मतलब वार्म अप वाले क्वेश्चंस थे ये, बट काफी सारे सवाल मैं तुमको करवा चुका हूं, तो वार्म अप अभी क्या करवाऊं यार, है ना, वार्म अप की जरूरत है नहीं हमें। जैसे अब इसमें क्या करें, जैसे इसको चलो देखते हैं। फॉर द पास्ट सेवरल इयर्स अ सर्टेन टेक्नोलॉजी हैज बीन वाइडली यूज्ड टू ट्रांसमिट डेटा अमंग नेटवर्क कंप्यूटर्स। हाँ, इसको एक बार पढ़ लो फिर बात करते हैं इसकी। पढ़ के इनफैक्ट कंक्लूजन बता ही दो, जब पढ़ ही रहे हो तो, इतनी मेहनत कर ही रहे हो तो कंक्लूजन भी बता दो। ओके, सो अब जब आपने कंक्लूजन शेयर कर दिया, पढ़ ही लिया, तो अब देख रहे हो इसमें से कुछ भी उठा करके पूछ सकता हूं मैं, है ना। सो द कंक्लूजन बेसिकली इज दिस: एप्ट्रॉन्स प्रोडक्ट इज लाइकली टू डोमिनेट द मार्केट, though they are similarly priced, equally easy to use. It's Aptron who is going to dominate the market. Why? That's your premise. So what are the rest of the things doing? See, for the past several years, a certain technology has been widely used to transmit data among network computers. Giving you the context, giving you the background, recently two data transmission companies have each developed separate systems that allow network data transmission at rates 10 times faster than the current technology allows. So they're talking about a background and a recent innovation. And thereafter is saying that, okay, between the two, Aptron is likely to dominate the market, even though their price is similar and they're equally easy to use. And here is the reason. So this is the core argument. The rest of the things are basically background or context. Similarly, check this. What is the conclusion? So this is one of those, can I say, an argument, counter argument kind of a scenario? Where there are some people who believe that, oh, we should have tenure in teaching. And then there are reasons. And then there are people who say that tenure also has drawbacks. So we have that too. So you get the drift. We've already done a lot of this. So let's dive into a question. Here is the first one. Now tell me if the poll feature is working for you if you are watching it on the app. So when I make it live in a little while from now, I'm giving you 150 seconds for this one for the timing. Well, let's just stick to 120 is enough. You should see the poll appearing. In case it does not appear, drop the answer in the chat and let me know that it is not appearing for you. It's the first class, so I may have to then follow with the team and then get it enabled for the batch. Let's see. Some of you may watch, may get to see it. Some may not. So let's see. Okay, so let's see. The time's up. Those of you who are watching on YouTube can drop your answer there. The correct answer is option E, which majority of you have managed to get it right, although I'm not able to see the total number of people who saw the poll and put it in here. But percentage, okay. So nobody has attempted B or C, so I'll skip it. And we're getting some very interesting numbers. Let's go. So there is a hunter. What does the hunter say? Hunters alone are being blamed by many people over the past 8 years for the decline in Alita National Forest's reindeer population. Yet, the moment you see yet, you know that the person does not agree with it. Yet clearly, tigers have also played an important role in this decline. In the past 8 years, tiger population has risen sharply under the forest department's protection, and examination of tigers found dead in the forest during the reindeer hunting season showed that a number of them had recently fed on reindeer. So basically, what is it that the hunter wants to say? He wants to tell us that hunters alone are not to be blamed for the decline in the reindeer population at, isn't it? ऐसे कैसे कैसे यार लोग बोल रहे हैं हंटर्स की वजह से हो रहा है, बस यही बोल नहीं यार, टाइगर्स भी मार रहे हैं उनको, अब तुम सिर्फ हमको ब्लेम क्यों कर रहे हो? सो वी आर नॉट द वंस टू बी ब्लेम्ड सोलली. कुछ पूछ रोल होगा बट अदरवाइज नहीं. ठीक है. अरे वो स्क्रॉल अभी कोई बात नहीं रोशन, बट थैंक यू, वो देखने की जरूरत जब लगेगी तब कर लेंगे. सो व्हाट डज दिस पार्ट डू नाउ? द हंटर गोज ऑन टू डिस्प्रूव दिस, right? So is it the main conclusion of the argument? No. Is it a finding that the argument seeks to explain? No, it is a finding that it is a statement that the argument seeks to disprove. See, it is an explanation that the argument concludes is correct. Nope. We are basically saying that this is incorrect. It provides evidence in support of the main conclusion. No, it is not giving you evidence that supports the main conclusion. It is a conclusion that the author is trying to disprove. So E, it introduces a judgment. Now you notice judgment, opinion, they are basically different words for conclusions. So it is a conclusion that the argument opposes. Yes, this yet proves that, and that is why the correct answer should be option E. Let's move over to the next one now. Here you go. And I'll once again set the poll for you and then be out of your way. Okay, let's see what you have put in as your answer. Right. So the correct answer to the question is option B, where C was also very tempting for a lot of us. Let's go ahead and discuss this threadbare. So we know that we are trying to figure out the purpose of the boldface question. Okay, so country Zeta's recent stock trading scandal should not diminish investors' confidence in the country's stock market. For one thing, country Zeta has a strong regulatory system is confirmed by the discovery of this scandal, as the following considerations show. Some fraudulent activity is inevitable. Any significant stock trading fraudulent will then likely be discovered if a stock market is well regulated. This facilitates improvement and arrests the potential perpetrators in regulatory processes. Now, when I took you through question 2, I actually brought in another element that I have not taught you yet. Okay, so if I say that, hey, arguments can be multi-tier, arguments can have stories, like apartment buildings have stories, no, housing complexes have stories, first floor, second floor, third floor, I say multi-tier. So does it make any sense to you if I say arguments can be multi-tier? You give your answer and I'll start writing something here for you. Let me just make up some space here. So critics and audience have praised this movie a lot. Therefore, it must be a good movie. Now, when I write this, I think it is very clear that the second statement is the conclusion and the first one is my premise. Done. Regular run-of-the-mill argument for you. But what if I do something else? Critics and audience have praised this movie a lot, therefore it must be a movie, and that's why we must watch it. Now, what have I done just now? The moment I've added this, that's why we must watch it. What am I doing? So there is a premise that helped us arrive at a conclusion. So if I look at it in terms of statements, that's your statement number 1. That's statement 2. This is statement 3. So first statement is acting as the premise for the second statement. So second is a conclusion. But when I say that is why we must watch it, what is my reason for watching it? Why must you and I watch this movie? Because it must be a good movie. So the third is being supported by second. So what exactly is second? Second is a conclusion based on first, but it also acts as a premise for third. So there are times we create arguments where we arrive at a conclusion, and then that conclusion can be used as a premise further up to support some other conclusion. So such conclusions are called intermediate conclusions. We arrive at these conclusions and then they go on to get supported, they go on to act as a premise somewhere else. Now that this part is hopefully clear to you, let's dive into this. So the main conclusion in this particular argument is this: country Zeta's, in fact let me highlight it. Country Zeta's recent stock trading scandal should not diminish investor confidence in the stock market. Why? Why should the scandal not diminish the confidence? He says, for one thing, they have a strong regulatory system. So don't worry, don't lose trust, don't lose confidence. They have a strong regulatory system, as is confirmed by the discovery of this scandal. अगर regulatory system अच्छा नहीं होता, तो ये स्कैंडल पकड़ा कैसे जाता, पकड़ा गया ना, तो मतलब रेगुलेटरी सिस्टम अच्छा है तो फिर कॉन्फिडेंस क्यों लूज कर रहे हो। और ये इसमें जो आगे दिया हुआ है ना, एज द फॉलोइंग कंसिडरेशंस शो, तो कुछ फ्रॉडुलेंट एक्टिविटी तो होगी, बट सिग्निफिकेंट स्टॉक ट्रेडिंग फ्रॉड इन इट विल वेरी लाइकली बी डिस्कवर्ड इफ अ स्टॉक मार्केट इज वेल रेगुलेटेड। तो यहां पे पकड़ा गया, तो दिस प्रूव्स दैट इट इज वेल रेगुलेटेड or strongly regulated. So basically what's happening here is that we have a conclusion. This is acting as a premise for this conclusion, and this part is acting as a premise for proving this. How do we know that it has a strong regulatory system? Because when you catch a fraud, it helps you prove that the market is well regulated. So in a way, this acts as a premise for this conclusion, but this conclusion is further up used as a premise to support something else. So this is also a conclusion. So this is a conclusion, this is also a premise. So in one context, it is a conclusion. In another one, it is acting as a premise. So we call this what? An intermediate conclusion. So what is the bold part? Intermediate conclusion. Look at C. It is the argument's main conclusion and is supported by another explicitly stated conclusion for which further support is provided. No, this is not the argument's main conclusion. This is the main conclusion. So we could have eliminated it here at this juncture. Let's see, it is an assertion for which the argument provides support and which itself is used to support the argument's main conclusion. So this is supporting the main conclusion, plus the argument also provides support for it. Assertion is another word for statement. Okay, so we have that there. Let's go ahead and work on one more question. So आज एक आखिरी क्वेश्चन करते हैं ये, फिर आगे चलेंगे. सो इसमें दो बोल्ड फेस पाथ्स हैं आपके पास, तो आपको इन दोनों का पर्पस बताना है. गो अहेड, टेल मी. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this now. Let's dive into it. So our answer to this particular question is option E, and I hope I gave adequate time for everyone to think. B and C were the traps that we did somehow fall for. So what exactly, if I asked you to give me the main conclusion of the author on the basis of this paragraph, what will your answer be? What will you say? So I'm gradually making the questions tougher, but what's your take? Molina, it's okay. In that case, just drop the answer here. And by the way, your answer was correct. I did see it here. This is the first session, so I think the poll feature, no, there are times when they need to configure it at the back end. I will check with them in case you don't see that. You should ideally see that. So what is the main conclusion here? So there are some people who say that, so see, physicists typically do their most creative work before the age of 50. A common thought is that this happens because aging by itself brings about a loss of creative capacity. So, what is the reason given for loss of creativity? Aging. Then what does the author say? Although a disproportionately large number entered their field at an older age than is usual, studies show that among these physicists, those who produce highly creative work are beyond the age of 50. Right? So, on one hand, we are saying that physicists do their most creative work before the age of 50, and then we are saying that, hey, there is a special category of physicists who enter the field at a late age. So let us say that the normal age for becoming a physicist is 25 years. So there are people who enter at the age of 25, right? And then we're seeing a disproportionately large number enter their field at older age than is usual. So the usual age is 25, but when you say disproportionately large, so let's put a number to it. Let's say around 30% of the physicists, when they enter the profession, they are, let's call them 40-year-old, right? Now, of these 70% who become physicists at 25, they do their most creative work before the age of 50. Of these 30% who enter the profession at the age of 40, for them, their creative work happens beyond the age of 50. Now, what does the author say? Since by the age of 50, a large majority of physicists have been working in their field for at least 25 years. See, 70% of these, by the time they reach 50, they've been working for 25 years. The study's finding strongly suggests that the real reason why physicists over 50 rarely produce highly creative work is not that they have aged, but rather that physicists over 50 have generally spent too long in their field. So basically, this entire argument is written to dispute a reason. So people say that the reason why physicists don't produce creative work beyond 50 usually is age. The author says it is not age, it is the amount of time that you've spent in the field. So after spending around 25 years, you don't remain creative. Those who have not spent 25 years by the time they turn 50, they are creative even after 50. So the reason why you do not see a lot of physicists creating creative work after or giving creative work after 50 is not age, but the time spent. So what is this? What does this do now? This is supporting the author's stance. And this is the actual reason. This is the actual reason that he is giving. Now check. The first provides evidence to support an explanation that the argument favors. This is the explanation that the argument favors. This is evidence for it. The second is that explanation. Whereas, let's compare it with the C, B and C. These are the two which were very popular. The first is an objection that has been raised against a position. Perfect. But is that a position defended in the argument? No. It is an objection raised against a position that the argument questions. It does not defend it. Then let's look at C. The first is evidence that has been used to support an explanation that the argument challenges. No, it is used to support an explanation that the argument favors. देख रहे हो कैसे एक एक वर्ड से गड़बड़ हो रही है. द फर्स्ट इज अ क्लेम. नहीं, ये एविडेंस था यार. क्लेम तो ये है, ये क्लेम नहीं है. D, the first is evidence that has been used to support an explanation that the argument challenges. ये same problem. तो यही rule out हो गया. So that is how we can go ahead and arrive at option E. हाँ, अब gradually यार मतलब सारे आसान सवाल नहीं करते. हालांकि मुझे पता है थोड़ा unfair होता है कि पहले ही क्लास में कॉन्सेप्ट भी आज ही पढ़ा, आर्ग्यूमेंट एनालाइज करना भी आज ही सीखा, फिर क्वेश्चन भी. बट देन आई फाइंड दैट once you learn to analyze the arguments, solving bold-faced questions is the natural progression, right? तो आज के लिए इतना ही. We will stop here. You will get these notes on the app. There are 2 more questions available in this. You can go ahead and answer these at leisure. So just to give you a quick recap, I've introduced you to critical reasoning along with the basic terms that I use. This may look like a minor thing, but it is going to be highly important. So I'd suggest that you do revise it, get it pat down. Then we talked about analyzing an argument, and finally we looked at how we approach bold-faced questions, which is very closely tied in with the ability of analyzing an argument. That's exactly what this question actually tests. Now, if you have academic queries, we have a doubt solving engine. You use that engine to raise your academic queries. For all the non-academic queries, here is a Telegram group where I remain fairly active. जो टाइम होता है थोड़ा थोड़ा मैं देता रहता हूँ, कोशिश करता हूँ हर रोज एक बार देख लूँ. हालांकि आज टाइम नहीं मिला तो मैं देख नहीं पाया. So you can either scan this QR code and be a part of it, or you can search for it by using this name. So whenever you're stuck somewhere and you need a quick boost, you can reach out to me. And before I sign out, here is something that I want to leave you with. You're slowly growing, but you're still growing, and that is enough. For some of us, critical reasoning is a bit of a challenge. The process, the growth, the improvement may appear slow, but as long as you grow, even if you feel that, okay, things are not moving rapidly, it's all right. We will eventually get or reach the desired level. So please persist, please persevere. And with that note, let's call it a day. Have a great evening ahead. It was lovely meeting some of you for the first time, and some of you I already know. And in the next class, which is tomorrow at 8, I will pick up the next question type, which is identify the assumption. That's extremely important. And I have assigned you one piece of homework, right? Make sure that you ponder over that a bit and then tune in. All right. Take care. Have a great day ahead, and I'll catch you tomorrow once again. Thank you, Josh. Thanks a lot.